There is a force within you that operates in silence, shaping your life without you realizing it. This force carries everything you have rejected, hidden, or denied within yourself. Desires, impulses, thoughts, fears, traits that your ego refuses to admit. Carl Jung called this force the shadow, and it does not disappear just because you decided to ignore it. On the contrary, the more you try to bury it, the more it grows in power, operating behind the scenes of your consciousness, determining your reactions, your choices, your way of seeing the world. You criticize others, judge their flaws, get irritated by behaviors you consider intolerable. But what you do not realize is that often this irritation is not about the other, it is about you. It is your shadow screaming for recognition. Every flaw you accuse out there is an unrecognized part of what resides within you. And as long as you continue projecting your darkness onto others, you will remain a prisoner of an unconscious cycle that governs your life without your permission. It is a cruel and inevitable process. What you refuse to integrate into your consciousness ends up taking control of your destiny. What you despise most in others will be exactly what you manifest in yourself, often without even realizing it. Not out of malice, not out of weakness, but because ignoring the shadow is signing an invisible contract, the contract to be governed by what you refuse to face. This video is for those who have courage, for those who are tired of pointing the finger outward and truly want to begin the most difficult and liberating process of existence, the confrontation with their own soul. Do not expect this path to be easy. You will have to face your deepest fears, recognize feelings you have always considered shameful, accept impulses you preferred to believe did not exist. But the reward is non-negotiable: emotional freedom, personal growth, real maturity. You are not made to live in war with yourself. The shadow that today sabotages you, frightens you, and manipulates you can and must be integrated. The choice is yours. Either you face what is hidden in your soul, or you will be consumed by what you refuse to see. Today, I will show you the way to break this cycle. But know this from the start: those who traverse the darkness of themselves never return to being the same. The shadow is not what most people imagine. It is not simply the bad side of the personality. It is not an internal demon to be exterminated, nor a curse to be fought against. Carl Jung saw the shadow as a vital part of the human psyche, a hidden territory where all the aspects that your ego, conditioned by society, family, and your own expectations, decided to hide, rest. Since childhood, you have been taught that certain behaviors are acceptable, while others are unacceptable. You learned to smile when you wanted to cry, to be kind when you wanted to scream, to suppress your anger, your ambition, your fear, your sensuality, your vulnerability. Everything that did not fit the mask you were forced to wear, you pushed into the basement of your mind. And that basement, this collection of renegade pieces of yourself, is what Jung called the shadow. But here lies the truth that few have the courage to accept. The shadow is not only made of violent impulses or destructive desires. It also holds your creative strength, your forgotten passion, your suffocated courage, your lost spontaneity. The shadow carries both your capacity for destruction and your potential for transformation. Ignoring it is choosing to live a mutilated life. Integrating it is accepting the totality of your existence. When you understand the shadow, you understand that the human being is not only light, but also darkness, and that denying this darkness is renouncing your very life force. The shadow contains the keys to your self-knowledge, to your emotional growth, to the building of true maturity. But these keys can only be earned through the brutal courage to look within without masks, without excuses, without pity. Without the integration of the shadow, the psyche becomes unbalanced. Repressed energy becomes corrosive. fueling symptoms such as anxiety, depression, outbursts of anger, compulsions, sabotages, and a sense of existential emptiness. The ignored shadow does not disappear. It simply finds other, more painful and self-destructive ways to manifest. And it is precisely here that emotional projection comes into play. When you do not recognize your own shadow, your unconscious takes it upon itself to show it to you, using others as a mirror. In the next part, we will deeply explore how this mechanism operates in your daily life, and how it relentlessly reveals what you most try to hide from yourself. When you do not see what exists within yourself, the world becomes a mirror. But not a clear mirror, rather a distorted one, filtered through the lenses of the unconscious. Carl Jung called this projection the mechanism by which the repressed contents of the psyche, that is, your unrecognized shadow, are projected onto others. You do not see them in yourself, so your unconscious pushes them outward. And this is how the behavior of others begins to bother you more than it should, awakening disproportionate, irrational, and often inexplicable reactions. Emotional projection is a brutally common phenomenon, but rarely understood. You feel anger towards someone for being arrogant, but deep down, it is your own suppressed need to assert yourself. You judge someone for being selfish, when in fact, it is you who live swallowing desires and accumulating resentment for never putting yourself first. You get irritated with people who express themselves too much because perhaps you learned early on that expressing emotions is a sign of weakness. The other becomes the stage where your unconscious acts out everything you have not had the courage to face within yourself. That is the point. Projection is not a conscious choice. It is a psychic defense. The ego, to preserve itself, needs to keep intact the image it has constructed of itself. So, everything that threatens that image, everything that goes against the character you believe you are, is expelled into the external world, and you start to see monsters in others without realizing that you are, in fact, fleeing from your own reflections. How many relationships have you destroyed by not realizing that the problem was not the other person, but the way they activated your shadow? How many times have you distanced yourself from someone without being able to explain exactly why, just because that presence made you feel something you could not name? How many times have you hated someone who, unwittingly, embodied what you fought hardest to keep buried? Projection turns the world into a battlefield, but this war happens within you. It blinds you, limits you, and prevents you from growing. And there is only one way to interrupt this cycle. Take responsibility for your emotions. Ask yourself with brutal honesty, what exactly about this person is bothering me so much, and why? But be careful. This process is not pleasant. It requires you to abandon the comfortable position of victim and take on the difficult task of examining your soul. And it is precisely here that transformation begins. When you stop fleeing and start listening to what your shadow is trying to say. Because if you have enough courage to traverse this discomfort, you will discover that the pain of projection is, in fact, your psyche's invitation to something greater. In the next part, we will explore what happens when you refuse this invitation. What happens when you spend your life ignoring your shadow, and without realizing it, become exactly what you condemn most in others. Ignoring the shadow is like trying to keep a fire under control by simply closing your eyes. You can pretend nothing is happening. You can believe the problem isn't yours. You can even build theories to justify your blindness. But the fire keeps burning, and the more you refuse to see it, the more it consumes who you are. When you project your repressed aspects onto the outside world, you lose touch with your internal reality. You start fighting imaginary wars, seeing enemies where there are only reflections, battling in others what you secretly fear to find in yourself. But what you don't understand, or refuse to accept, is that what you hate out there is silently shaping who you become inside. Carl Jung made this clear. Everything we do not face in our consciousness appears in our lives as fate. If you do not confront your repressed anger, it becomes resentment and passive aggression. If you deny your envy, it transforms into silent bitterness. If you hide your ambition, it rots into frustration and self-pity. Gradually, you cease to be who you think you are and become exactly what you swore to combat. This is how hypocritical moralists are born, who publicly condemn the very impulses they secretly live. This is how compulsive altruists emerge, who, by over-sacrificing themselves, feed a subterranean hatred for those who do not reciprocate. This is how good men and women become oppressors in their homes, their jobs, their relationships, suffocated by the weight of what they never had the courage to integrate. You can spend your whole life running away, justifying, pointing fingers outward. But the truth is relentless. What you reject in yourself does not disappear. It merely finds new masks to manifest. And the more you ignore it, the stronger it becomes. Until the day comes when there will be no real difference left between who you thought you were and what you despised the most. The unintegrated shadow takes the wheel of your life and drives without your permission. It sabotages your relationships, destroys your dreams, undermines your strengths, and sabotages every step you try to take towards something greater. And you, blinded by pride, will continue blaming the world, not realizing that the enemy has always been within. But there is a way out. There is a path for this force to stop destroying you and start empowering you. A way to transform poison into medicine, hatred into self-knowledge, shame into personal power. And this path begins with a conscious decision to integrate the shadow, to bring it into the light of consciousness. In the next part, we will dive into this transformation process. You will understand how to start the journey of shadow integration and what is truly necessary to regain control of your mind and your life. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It breaks down Jung's core ideas and gives you tools to understand yourself more deeply. Link is in the pinned comment. Integrating the shadow is not a simple task. It is not a symbolic gesture, nor a superficial mental decision. Integrating the shadow is a hard, painful, and above all, transformative process. It is consciously walking into the forbidden territory of your own soul, facing everything you have spent your life trying to avoid. The first step is brutal recognition. You need to admit that darkness exists within you. No excuses, no rationalizations, no trying to soften the impact. There is anger in you, there is envy, there are impulses of domination, a desire for revenge, fear of failure, vanity, pride, and there is also repressed talent, forgotten courage, dormant potential. Denying any of these parts is perpetuating the shadow's dominance. The second step is conscious observation. The shadow reveals itself in your most intense and disproportionate reactions. When you feel hatred for someone without apparent reason, when you explode in anger over something small, when you feel shame for a legitimate part of yourself, these are the moments when the shadow whispers. Learn to observe without judging, without trying to justify yourself. Just look, just acknowledge. The third step is compassionate acceptance. Integrating the shadow does not mean surrendering to it, nor justifying destructive behaviors. It means accepting that you are a complete human being, made of light and darkness, of strength and weakness. There is no true emotional maturity without this acceptance. Without it, you will always be stuck in a sterile internal struggle, trying to amputate vital parts of yourself to fit into an unrealistic image of perfection. But integrating the shadow alone is not always possible. Often you will need support. Dream analysis, deep and sincere self-reflection, the practice of self-observation, and above all, Working with a therapist specialized in Jungian analytical psychology can be powerful tools in this process. A trained therapist knows how to help you navigate the layers of the unconscious, how to identify patterns of projection, how to recognize the self-sabotaging complexes that keep you trapped. True alchemy happens when you transform what was once a source of shame into a source of strength. When you realize that your anger can become assertiveness, that your vanity can be redirected to genuine self-care, that your envy can reveal legitimate desires for growth. The shadow does not need to destroy you. If worked through, it can become the foundation of your true inner freedom. But do not be fooled. Integrating the shadow is a continuous process. There is no end point, no finish line where you become pure or enlightened. The human psyche is dynamic, and new shadows emerge throughout life. The question is not to eliminate the darkness, but to keep consciousness active, vigilant, integrated. And it is when you begin to integrate your own shadow that something extraordinary happens. Your relationship with the world changes. Emotional projection decreases. Relationships become more genuine. You cease to be a hostage to your automatic reactions and start responding to the world from an internal center of strength and balance. In the next part, we will dive into this visible transformation, how the process of shadow integration not only changes you internally, but reflects a more balanced, more authentic personality to the world, and, above all, free. When you start to integrate your shadow, the world around you changes, but the truth is that the one who changed was you. What once seemed unbearable in others now becomes understandable. What previously provoked hatred, envy, repulsion, or judgment now awakens compassion, empathy, and discernment. You stop seeing enemies everywhere and begin to see human beings as flawed and contradictory as you are. Emotional projection loses its power because the source of the conflict has been recognized. You no longer need to pour your frustrations onto others. You no longer need to justify your own pain by attacking, judging, or rejecting the external world. You learn to hold the mirror up to your own face and courageously ask, "What does this reaction reveal about me?" This transformation is profound. It is not just a change in behavior, it is a change in the structure of your perception. The integrated shadow offers you something that the ego alone could never achieve: balance. A balance that is not fragile like pretense, nor tense like repression, but solid like the rock that has survived all internal storms. The result of this overflows into practical life. Your relationships improve because you no longer seek in others the approval that was once lacking in you. The criticisms of others no longer hurt you because you are no longer a slave to the need to appear perfect. You become more authentic because you no longer need to hide who you are. You become stronger because you do not waste energy fighting against yourself. And this transformation does not go unnoticed. The people around you feel the difference. Some draw closer, recognizing in you a more genuine, secure, and vibrant presence. Others distance themselves, unable to cope with someone who no longer participates in the unconscious games of projection and blame. This is part of the process. Integrating the shadow is also about purifying the environment around you. Carl Jung taught us that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. True maturity arises from this courageous confrontation with one's own soul. True strength emerges when you stop fleeing from yourself. But there is one last piece we need to address: the real difficulty of walking this path alone. No matter how strong you are, there are moments when the weight of the shadow is too great to be carried without support. There are techniques, practices, and specific approaches that can guide you in this process of self-discovery and integration with more safety and effectiveness. In the next and final part, we will talk directly about this, how to seek help, how to strengthen your internal process, and, most importantly, how to continue evolving without ever betraying your essence. You spent your life trying to hide your flaws, trying to be what others expected, adjusting to fit into molds that were never made for you. You tried to erase impulses, feelings, inner truths, believing that this would make you stronger, more accepted, more correct. But all of this only served to feed the shadow. It only strengthened what you feared. The truth is that there is no possible peace while you are at war with yourself. Integrating the shadow is not about becoming someone perfect. It is about becoming someone whole. It is about reclaiming the parts of your soul that you abandoned along the way, not so that they dominate you, but so that you know them, understand them, and finally bring them under your consciousness. It is the opposite of repression. It is emotional responsibility. It is psychic maturity. It is inner freedom. You don't have to remain trapped in destructive patterns. You no longer need to live reacting automatically to everything and everyone. You no longer need to feel at the mercy of your emotions or a slave to toxic relationships that feed the illusion that the problem is always outside of you. You no longer need to feel fragmented, divided, exhausted. There is a path, difficult, yes, but absolutely transformative, to become someone who lives with authenticity, balance, and most importantly, awareness. But no one walks this path alone. If you feel ready to begin this journey more deeply, consider seeking therapeutic support. Analytical psychology, based on Jung's work, offers real and effective resources for this inner dive. A good therapist doesn't tell you what to do. They help you listen to what you have been avoiding hearing. And this listening can change everything. Now, I want to know from you, which part of this video confronted you the most? What made you reflect? Which shadow did you recognize, even if just for a second? Write in the comments, not just to interact, but to put into words what you may have never said out loud. This is the first way to bring the unconscious to light, naming what was once just a sensation. And if this video spoke to you on a deeper level, don't ignore it. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. This is not just content, it is a space for those who want to go beyond the surface and dive into the soul. And remember to watch the next video. It is just as important as this one. Every piece of this journey is essential, and you are not here by chance. The shadow only controls those who are afraid to look within. You no longer need to live in fear.